Mavrika! Welcome to a new episode of Let's Talk Taíno. I'm Priscilla Colon, co-founder and creative here at Guak'anaín, where our mission is to promote the Taíno language and culture. Before we begin, I'd love for you to take a moment to subscribe to our channel and click those notifications. It will help us reach more viewers just like you who want to learn about the Taíno language and culture. On today's episode, we're going to be working with a new verb, guak'anaín, to find. We're going to be asking and answering questions about where we find certain objects and animals. Now, we've studied all these places before, so I think that you'll be able to ask and answer these questions. Now, let's get started with the verb guak'anaín, to find. As you can see from the list, guak'anaín does not change its form when you combine it with your subject pronoun. For example, guak'anaín, I find. Guak'anaín, you find, and so on. Today, we're going to be working mainly with guak'anaín, we find. Now, you'll also need to know how to create phrases with mun. You use mun when you want to say that you are in or at a place. So, for example, mun boharak, in or at the house. Mun guak'ara, in or at the cave. Mun guak'ani, at the beach. Mun iruku ara, in the human body. Now we reviewed these phrases with mun because they're going to be one of the answers to the questions. So keep these phrases in mind as we review the question. Now let's start with our exercise. We're going to look at a couple of objects and ask where we find them, right? So let's get started. The question we want to answer is, Amaná guak'anaín, where do we find guatuburen ota ashukunagu, bureka ota duhoyabi nagu. Where do we find these objects? Of course, mun boharak, in the house. You see how that works? You look at the objects and you try to figure out where you usually find them. Then you use the phrase with mun to answer the question. Now let's try the next one. Let's look at those objects carefully. Amaná guak'anaín, where do we find kuchetibiri, guaba? This one's interesting. So where do we find kuchetibiri ota guaba? Mun guak'ara, in the cave, of course, because that's where kuchetibiri ota guaba live. That wasn't so bad, right? Now let's look at our next example. I think you'll get this one. Amaná guak'anaín, where do we find baguani kobo? Can you guess where we might find these two things? Baguani ota kobo? That's right. The answer is mun koakeni, at the beach. Now let's try our last example. Amaná guak'anaín, where do we find matunai ota ososonagu? Oh, this is tricky. We're talking about human organs. So where do we find them? Mun iruku ara, in the human body, of course. Wasn't that a simple lesson? We were able to use a new verb, guak'anaín, to find, to talk about where we find certain objects, animals, and other items. It was so cool, and we were able to use the phrase mun plus the place or thing to talk about where we find those items or objects or animals. Now, before we leave, let's review one more time everything we learned today. Guak'anaín, To find. Guak'anaín, we find. Amaná guak'anaín, where do we find? Guatuburen ota ashukunagu, the stove and eggs. Bureka ota duhoyabi nagu, the table and chairs. Mun boharak, in or at the house. Kuchetibiri, bat. Guaba, spider. Mun guacara, in or at the cave. Baguani, seawater. Kobo, seashell or conch. Mun koakeni, at the beach. Matunai, heart. Ososonagu, lungs. Mun iruku ara, in the human body. Wasn't that great? I love that question about where we find certain things because I can use it in my everyday life. Sometimes I lose things around the house, and this gives me a chance to practice my Taíno. As always, I can't thank you enough for joining me here week after week, learning Taíno with me, learning about the culture, new vocabulary words, so that you're helping me practice my Taíno. And as I always say, together we can bring back Taíno. If you're looking for more resources, I recommend checking out casarito.com, where we've gathered all of our kids' books to teach kids about the Taíno language and culture, other book recommendations, as well as our digital course that you can try out completely for free. This will give you a chance to learn the Taíno language and about the culture using the latest language technology. You can also sign up for our newsletter to stay in the know. And of course, we're available on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. In the meantime, ta'i karaya guaitiao nagu.